Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of the Nerdy Things podcast. As usual, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jules. Hi, Jules.
Heyo.
And Tim. What's up, Tim?
Good morning.
It is the morning.
It is indeed. We're recording a little earlier than usual, so if Tim is sluggish, well, just blame that.
I just rolled out of bed and went right here to the studio.
Rolled out,
Very
into
nice.
the studio. Rolled out onto the studio.
Rolled into it, rolled onto it. I don't know, but I'm here.
So first off, I want to say thank you to everybody that's listening, everybody that's interacting with us. There's a lot of people interacting with us on our social media at Nerdy Things Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us as well at nerdythingspod@gmail.com. So one thing I wanted to do to end last week's talk, we got a message on Facebook from Alistair, and he said some stuff. Tiny detail from one of my favorite films of all time, when Shrek is fighting the Duloc Knights. It's actually not All-Star, but is instead a half-cocked cover of Joan Jett's Bad Reputation. Take that, Tim. I think that Bare Naked Ladies is in a better spot because they left with their dignity, unlike the joke that is Smash Mouth.
Well, I don't like him crapping on Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers. That's way
Smash
better.
Brothers.
It's first thing in the
Retro
morning.
Games episode.
Super Smash Mouth.
Super Smash Mouth. I don't like him crapping on Super Smash Mouth, okay? Because it's one of my favorite games of all time. Yeah, so I don't know. Did I say that it was All-Star? Kevin and I were talking about this, and I meant to go back and review the tape, but I didn't. I thought I just said it was a Smash Mouth song. I don't remember saying that it was All-Star. If I did, I was wrong, so I'll admit it.
Yeah.
This is a rare occasion, but I think what we'll probably do is go back and review the tape, and then if I'm right and I didn't say All-Star, we'll go ahead and play that little loop right now. You know when, in the original movie, when Shrek has to fight all of those guards when he first gets to Duloc, right? The wrestling match, let's call it. A Smash Mouth song is playing in the background. And then say,
Kevin, can you clip?
Alistair, you were inserting things into my mouth. Words into my mouth.
And then if Tim is wrong, we'll just, leave this blank and go, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Cool. No, I'll get to all the other shout-outs later.
But
when we
thanks
get
for
into
listening,
actually what we're doing.
Alistair. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
We might be working with him on something.
I need to talk about the Thor trailer.
Oh, that was just coming out of my mouth, Kevin. Way to go.
I have to. There's no way I can avoid it. I'm sorry. I'm so excited. I peed a little. Tim texted me the other day. He was like, have you seen this yet? And I hadn't. I knew it was available, but I hadn't yet watched it. I watched it. I cried. It was the greatest thing in the world.
So good.
I'm gonna quote my text right now. I'm gonna tell you exactly the text that I sent to Kevin. It was, dude, with like 60 U's and 3 exclamation marks. Thor with more exclamation marks, because that's all I could muster to describe my excitement.
You just have to send it.
I had literal open mouth chills after watching that trailer. I think this is going to be not only the best Thor movie, but it's going to be one of the better Marvel movies to come out of that franchise.
Definitely. It looks like a lot of fun, and it was just a great trailer. All the Jeff Goldblum's in it. Come on.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. I love Jeff Goldblum. I think he's great. I thought he was very good as Ian Malcolm in Jurassic Park, which we kind of talked about when we did our books to movie episode, where he was a character that was so compelling in the Jurassic Park movie that they actually wrote the sequel to the book that included him, even though he died in the first book. Mm-hmm. And I think that's spectacular. That's Jeff Goldblum that did that, and no one else.
Yeah, I feel like
Definitely.
Jeff Goldblum has recently, for what reason I can't quite pinpoint, become super popular. It's not like he's done anything really big recently, but it's like Jeff Goldblum's all over the internet.
That Independence Day movie.
Yeah.
Jeff Goldblum, the ageless wonder, the style icon, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, that's cool, because I've been a fan of Jeff Goldblum for 30 years, I've always been fascinated with Jeff Goldblum and the, way he speaks. And it's always been very fascinating to me, and I love it.
He's like a modern day Shatner.
But so much better.
I think a lot of the I guess my age are coming around to his kind of hipster style, and they're like, oh my god, this guy, I really like his style and whatever. And it's like he's been doing it since like forever. And I want to jump ahead into just a quick anecdote. I heard him on Mark Maron's WTF podcast, and if you haven't listened to that episode, it's really great. Jeff Goldblum's in it, and you know, when they first started off the trailer, I was kind of tentative for the Thor movies. It's been one of the, you know, lower ranked, I think, Marvel movies. I think it's safe to say that. And then when they started off with, I think, Guardians of the Galaxy vibe, and I was like, okay, what are they trying to do here? And then it was like a split second of that, and then it just went right in, and I was like, oh my god, okay, yes, this works. I'm happy, you know.
And it's so weird. Like it doesn't bother me at all that Marvel is using the same sort of theme with the Guardians of the Galaxy feel to other things because it's theirs, but it bothers the shit out of me when DC or Star Trek or any of the others do it. For the most part, I mean, at least the most recent Star Trek, I feel like they did a really good job of integrating the songs into the story of it, and so I didn't mind it overall after the fact, but I really felt like the trailer was going for that Guardians vibe. I felt like the new DC ones are doing the same thing, and I just find that it's a little played out. Be a little original, do your own thing, don't just copy Marvel, you know.
Well, the weird thing, so it's funny, I didn't even think about the Star Trek thing. Definitely a different era of music that they used, and it was definitely plot centric, which was cool. That was really cool. The thing is, like, when DC does it in their trailers, they've used music from the 70s specifically. I don't equate it to Guardians of the Galaxy, because Guardians of the Galaxy is built around that music. It's not like they're just using it as the background for the trailer. It's central to the theme of the movie. It's part of, woven into the fabric of the movie itself. So that's why when they did this with Thor, I was a little intrigued. I'm like, even the logo had this 70s vibe to it. But I guess it goes back to, an era of when comic book movies or comic books themselves were intertwined into rock music, you know? Queen did the Flash Gordon theme song, and you had, Iron Man. So I guess it's kind of a throwback to that musical era anyways. But it's just the whole vibe of the way that they used that song in the trailer and then kind of changed the way the logo came in and out. I thought that they did a really cool job with it on this particular trailer.
Yeah, I think it's very, very well edited. I think it's spectacular looking, and I'm so excited. Oh my god, I can't wait.
And when they get into the gladiator arena and the Hulk comes out, and all I could think of was Elf. When he's like,
yes,
Santa, I know him.
Yes, I know him.
That's my friend from work. Oh, so brilliant! I love it when Thor does funny stuff. It's the perfect thing to do with that character, is to just take this really serious guy, not somebody that doesn't get humor. It's not like Drax, but it's just this kind of serious guy, very regal. He's a god, but I'm gonna say something really funny now, and you're gonna laugh.
Yeah, it's that fish out of water straight man.
Right.
Like it's just awesome, and Chris Hemsworth does a great job with it. I think his comedic timing is amazing. He's just so like full of mirth, so like jubilant. I can't explain it any other way.
The Hemsworth brothers in general, I feel, are people that under other circumstances I wouldn't like. They're like pretty boys, and that's why they're acting and this and that. But both the way they act and the way they are in interviews in real life, they're super funny guys, and I can't hate them. Like I want to, but I can't. I just enjoy them in general.
What else do we have on the thing?
Did anybody see the leaked trailer for the Battlefront 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2 that came out recently?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not excited.
Why?
I mean, don't get me wrong.
Did you guys see that trailer?
Star Wars.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a great trailer? I mean, it looks great. It looks wonderful. It almost seemed like they were going to add some more story element to it, but I'm just not excited. I bought the PlayStation Battlefront bundle when the last one came out. That's how I got my PlayStation 4, and it was such a letdown. I felt like it had no replay value, and I really didn't like the feel. I just can't stand it. I'm not gonna, as a Star Wars nerd, this is so painful to me, but I'm not gonna buy it.
It looks like a cool game, but all I hear about it is that it lacks content in a major way.
Yeah, Yeah, it absolutely does. And they've added some stuff since the original release of the new Battlefront, but I can't bring myself to go back to it and spend any money on it because it was such a disappointment.
So my pipe dream with this is that they realize their mistake the first time around, and that they put more story into the game,
Yep.
which they probably won't, because if they made a ton of money on the last one and didn't put any story in it, they'll probably be just as lazy this time. But the second thing is, I hope it comes to the Nintendo Switch, which again it probably won't. But these are my two pipe dreams for that game because I really would like to play it.
Oh yeah, can we get a Switch update on Tim? How you've had it for a while since the Switch episode, and how you liking the Switch so far?
Well, the reason why I just woke up was because I was playing Breath of the Wild till 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, okay.
I was stuck in a maze that I couldn't get out of. Apparently, I'm really bad at mazes.
That's really funny.
I decided to just go ahead and use the internets, and they had some instructions on how to beat the maze from the beginning, but I can't get back to the beginning of the maze.
Is that why you get lost at work so much?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm just finding this out really bad with mazes. So yeah, but the game is so awesome. Like, it's just, every time I play it, it's just so enjoyable. I sit down to play for like an hour and a half, and I end up playing for like 4 hours, and you just can't put it down. It's so good. Switch overall has been good. They've released some updates, helped some things out with it, but the games need to start coming, and they are. There's a Nintendo Direct actually going on later tonight that's supposed to focus around Splatoon 2 and ARMS, which are going to be their two big first-party releases for the next part of this year. Mario Kart Deluxe, the re-release of the complete Wii U game, comes out in a couple weeks. So there should be about 3 games in the next 3 months that could have some real replay value on them. And if there's any big Nintendo news on that Direct tonight, I think we may record a short segment to append to this podcast to keep you guys in the loop. Yeah, also in nerdy news, this isn't news per se, but an interesting article. Kevin and I talked about this a little bit last night. I want to get the name of the website. I don't know if they're a legit website or not, but I want to give them a little credit because I think this is brilliant. It's called Futurism, and they had this little op-ed piece, and their idea is that Apple should buy Tesla and make Elon Musk the CEO. Discuss.
I'm behind that 100%.
Why are you behind that?
Innovate. Because and Tim had a point. We don't think that Tim Cook is a bad CEO at all, but he is an adequate Apple CEO, where Elon Musk is an innovator and would be a phenomenal CEO for Apple. They have the capital. He has the brains. If you put those two together, it would be absolutely amazing. We'd be living on Mars with Apple watches before you knew it.
The Apple Watch would actually do stuff, you know?
Yes.
I mean, things that would work in our life. I mean, here's the thing. As I said, Tim Cook is a fine CEO. I think he's a smart business guy. I think he's very good dealing with other production facilities and things like that. All the behind-the-scenes stuff, all the things that it takes to run a successful business, Tim Cook does really well. As evidenced by the fact that the recent Apple products haven't been revolutionary, yet they're still making a ton of money, you know? That's a business mind doing his job. The thing is, when Apple was at its peak, it was when Steve Jobs was inspiring the talented engineers they have here to do things that nobody thought possible, or that no one even thought needed to be done. And Tim Cook's not that guy. And
yeah, my favorite is the story of when they showed the prototype of the iPod to Steve Jobs, and he just walked over and dropped it in a fish tank. This was, multi-million-dollar prototype, and he drops it in a fish tank to watch the bubbles come out to tell them that there's room that they could take out of it. That's what we need. That type of, like, no bullshit, you're going to get this done thinking, which is exactly what Elon Musk does to his engineers with their stuff. He sets a date, they hit that date. If they don't, they pay the price.
They push boundaries and they make him. So I have a Steve Jobs story because I read his biography, one of the most fascinating books I ever read in my life.
Oh, very cool.
Back when they were doing the original Macintosh computer, they had been working on another one that was a little bit higher end and more expensive. And he said, no. If we're going to release this computer, it needs to be something that everybody can use. So it needs to be under $1,000, I think was the price point or something like that, which was unheard of. So there was certain processors that they had to work with to meet that price point. And at the time, nobody had ever released to the home a graphical user interface. And they borrowed some of the concept from was it IBM? No, it wasn't IBM. It was like Xerox. It was a copier company. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, but Xerox had this basement of people working on this graphical user interface for a computer, but they had no idea what to do with it. So Steve Jobs was friends with one of the guys over there. He took his engineers, had them look at it. They had a contractual agreement. There was no, you can't copy this, but essentially he said, look, we need to do something like this. And so when they were creating the graphical user interface, the chipset that they were using, imagine this, the chipset that they were using couldn't perform square root mathematics. That's crazy, right?
That's
So the
nuts.
problem with not being able to perform square root mathematics is you can't instruct it to draw a circle. You can do squares, you can do triangles, but you can't do circles. So he said, you have to be able to do circles. And like, we can't do this. We need to use a different chipset. He goes, no, do it. So guess what? They come to him and they say, hey, we figured out how to do it. This is amazing. We figured out a math equation that can simulate square root functions. And he goes, oh, that's cool. Totally unimpressed at this engineering marvel. And says, now I need squares with rounded corners.
Yeah,
and they looked at
that
him
story.
and they said, squares with rounded corners? Why do we need squares with rounded corners? And he starts flipping out and pointing to all of the things in the room, tables, chalkboards, windows, all of these things that don't have hard edges. He says, people don't know how to use this machine, and they won't know how to use it if it doesn't look familiar to them. And squares with rounded corners look familiar. And the guy figured out how to do it. And that is how Steve Jobs innovated. He didn't do it himself, but he told people what needed to be done, and they did it. That's exactly what Elon Musk does. Problem is, Elon Musk is running short on money to do all the crap that he can do. Apple's got an excess of money to do the crap that they want to do. Put the two together, you got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that, as Kevin says, puts us on Mars with an Apple Watch that shoots out holographic images and tells us how to make eggs. I don't know, whatever it does. They're going to be amazing.
There you go.
I think that is a good pairing, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Now we just need to
I can get behind that.
people involved and make it happen.
There you go.
This is
We'll make it happen.
the Nerdy Things podcast is going to take down Taylor Swift, the devil, and we're going to get Elon Musk and Apple together. This podcast, our fans, make it happen.
That's our goal.
We're
I
doing
like
it.
it. Yeah, I think that's a good goal. Achievable, attainable. We got it, guys. Let's do it. Let's jump into our main topics. What do you want to get into first? We're going to talk about two different things.
Let's talk about our favorite podcast first.
Very cool. Okay.
I'll go first. I think, you know what, the podcast that got me into listening to podcasts and made me want to do my own is a podcast called The Weekly Planet. Every week, these two morons from Australia have, it's quote unquote the official podcast of comicbookmovie.com. And they just talk about the most random shit, and they go on for about an hour each week. And I've listened to every episode. I went back 2 years and listened to their entire back catalog because they are the funniest, most fascinating guys I have ever had the opportunity to listen to, and I think it's great. That's basically one of the ones that I listen to no matter what else I'm doing, whenever it comes out.
So what makes a good podcast to you guys? Like when you think about, I want to listen to this podcast, like what is it that you're looking for?
What I'm looking for is a few different things from a few different podcasts. If somebody has a really cool voice or something that, okay, let me break it down even more. Something that's going to keep my attention, I think. And, whenever somebody has like a pretty cool voice or a cool way of speaking, that could help keep attention. It doesn't matter the length. I don't think a lot of people worry about how long a podcast is, but if you're listening to podcasts, you can just, pop it in some other time. You don't have to listen to it all.
I don't think length comes into play in my mind at all, because some of the ones I listen to are 7 minutes. Some of them are an hour and a half, and
Yeah.
I don't, it doesn't matter. I'll listen to whatever you have.
Something that does matter to me a whole lot is audio quality. And it didn't used to matter to me a whole lot, but once I started, I guess, editing really heavily my own podcast, that it just really matters a lot to me. I can't listen to a podcast that has a crappy microphone or like somebody's blown out a whole lot all the time, and it's just like really, I don't know. That's probably just me, just because I really like audio and all that. But if it's really crappy, even though I like the podcast or the people or something like that, I won't listen to it because I just can't. Like there's this one called Comedy Outliers that I really like. There's these two comedians. that in New York, and they're really funny and they're awesome, but a lot of the times their podcasts are like remote, or only one of them has a really good mic and the other one is, Skyping, and it's like really bad Skype, and it's just like, I can't listen to this. I have to stop this episode, So audio quality for me was one thing.
Yeah, I mean, if it's really entertaining, I don't really care about audio quality. Some of my other favorites, what I'm looking for is something funny or something that's going to teach me something. Like, I want to learn something, or I want it to be engaging. So I listen to, like, Adam Ruins Everything, which is both. I learn,
that's great.
Some really cool stuff, and I think Adam Conover is hilarious. I listen to Science Versus with, I forget her name, but she's funny. That's another one where I learn a bunch of stuff. I miss the Mystery Show because I think Starlee Kind is one of the nicest and cutest people I have ever had the opportunity to listen to. And I like people who know what they're talking about. I like Reply All. I like Trumpcast. But as far as entertaining, my top two, aside from Weekly Planet, would be Ghostbusters Resurrection and Film Reroll. Ghostbusters Resurrection, they're actually role-playing as the South Florida Ghostbusters and sort of dealing with things within the Ghostbusters universe. And they do a really good job of that. They're really funny. They're good people. They have a great grasp of the story, and they're just fun. It's a fun podcast to listen to. And with Film Reroll, it's sort of like that. They role play and use dice and everything, but they play out a different movie each week. Oh. And so they'll do like Jumanji or some of the Wizard of Oz. Die Hard is one that they're going to get to. But they've done a bunch of them, and they're absolutely amazing how some of them turn out completely different than it was or was otherwise. Really, really, entertaining that way. The one I'm stuck on right now is S-Town by the people that did Serial. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in the last episode of S-Town, and I
held off on the last one. Yeah,
it's compelling, but I'm not quite sure where it's going, even halfway through the last episode.
Yeah, that's kind of like what would you call that sort of podcast? Like a discovery sort of documentary, sort of?
Sort of. It's like a true narrative of an interesting situation, because I don't think it's, I mean, an interesting individual, I guess it was what it would be. It's a case study in one man.
Yeah, for sure. So along those lines, S-Town was great. Something that I just finished up recently, and then another one that I was watching. Another one I was listening to before that was Missing Richard Simmons, which is sort of on the same line, in the same vein, where it's kind of like a discovery documentary of one person, Richard Simmons. Where did he go? And another one that I don't know if a lot of people listened to a while back, In the Dark, is another sort of discovery documentary, which is really, really interesting. So yeah, some of those are just, great audio drama things. And then, you got all your usual WTF with Mark Maron. There's another one that I really like called You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes.
Holmes, yeah, I got that one in here.
Yeah, he's a comedian. And he has a TV show, which is really funny, called Crashing on HBO. And then I got into the McElroy brothers. I don't know if you know who those guys are. They're really funny.
No, never heard of them.
They do a podcast called My Brother and Me. And then they do a ton of other podcasts. Griffin and Justin, they're three brothers, and they just give advice and all that stuff, stupid advice. But then they all have different other podcasts, which are really awesome. So one of them, Travis, he is a professional podcaster. That's like what he does. He does like 8 podcasts, and Justin and Griffin work at Polygon Gaming, and they do some podcast stuff for them. So they do the Adventure Zone, which is like a D&D fun gaming sort of thing. Travis does Schmanners, where it's like some really cool like history on, common etiquette that we use today. Cool Games Inc., they just talk about gaming and stuff. Trends Like These, which is just like more news oriented. And they just have a ton of podcasts. Just those three brothers are doing a ton of podcasts, and they got deep in there and deep in the McElroy verse, and it's really awesome.
Sounds like you're an honorary member of the family.
Yeah, because it's them three, and then some of the podcasts they do with their wives, and then some of them their wives do together, and
Nice.
it's really crazy. Yeah. So McElroyshows.com.
What about you, Tim?
Yeah, so podcasts for me, the interesting thing about them is it's a time issue, you know? I love the idea of podcasts, but when am I going to listen to them? I listen to them on my commute sometimes, but, I'm a big fan of music, so I'm listening to a lot of music on my commute. I'm also a huge fan of sports radio. It's what I wanted to do with my life before I realized that was, a pipe dream to some degree, although I'm regretting that decision more and more every day because there's so many more avenues open for sports talk radio than there was when I was in college, at least locally here. So I think that might have been something I could have done. Who knows? But anyways, sports radio is in my car a lot. So it's like, really, when do I listen to podcasts? And it's, a few times on my commute during the week, to and fro. So I can't really listen to that many of them, but I love the idea of podcasts. To me, podcasts, we talked about this last week, what is and what isn't nerdy. It's the ultimate nerdy medium, because what is being nerdy? It's basically being super passionate about something, whether it's really popular or super niche, right? And with podcasts, anybody can do a podcast, clearly. So it could be about,
Here we are.
The most niche thing possible. And as long as you're super passionate about it and want to talk about it every week, just go ahead and do it. And if there's other people that are super passionate about the same thing, they'll find it and they'll listen to it. And maybe it's only 50 people a week that listen to it, but they enjoy doing it. You enjoy listening to it. So, it's cool. You don't need ratings. You don't need sponsors. You don't need all these other things you need to be on the radio. You just need a passion about the topic. So it is literally the ultimate nerdy medium.
Yeah, I mean, just to self-plug here, I also do the Chevron Locked podcast,
God.
which is super niche. It's Stargate, and we record every week, but we get like 150 people every week that download it and talk to us and yell at us and laugh, and it's you're absolutely right, Tim. It's the weirdest thing to think that there are that many people listening to that silly little podcast on that stupid topic that's so narrow, but has an audience.
Yeah, I mean, if it's what you're into, you're going to be scouring the internet for stuff about it. So if somebody else is really into it and willing to talk about it, well, great. Go ahead, you'll listen to them. So that's what I like about podcasts. My first introduction to podcasts was when they were really podcasts. So Apple, created the podcast. It was for the iPod. It was a medium for people to release little shows and information about things they were passionate about. So in its fledgling stages, a lot of music artists used it as a way to kind of do some behind the scenes. We're like, hey, we're in the studio. We're coming out with a new album. We want to stay connected with the fans. So let's do some podcasts every week. And Bare Naked Ladies was always about nerdy stuff and always about trying to connect with fans and keep them in the loop. So they did a podcast when they were releasing Maroon, their follow-up to their first really big commercial success in Stunt. And I listened to that, pretty religiously. It was a lot of fun. They're funny guys, and they just had a blast just kind of talking, while they were in the studio, talking about the music, talking about life, and just joking on each other, which is, kind of their whole MO. So that was like my introduction to podcasts. And then Kevin Smith, the famed and acclaimed director of very niche movies. He is the biggest podcast dude because he's got so much nerdy stuff that he just wants to talk about, and he's the ultimate kind of rebel in the sense that I don't want to have studios back this. I don't want to have some man telling me, dude, what I got to make my movie about and what I got to talk about, man, because that's not what I like to do. So podcasts for him were this perfect way to talk about comic books, talk about, other movies and film, talk about his own projects, talk about whatever the heck he wants to talk about. And he does an awesome job with it. So I off and on listen to a lot of Kevin Smith's, stuff. And it wasn't until the last couple of years that I really started to get into him again. And a lot of it had to do, most of the podcasts I listen to are sports related. Because again, I love, sports radio. So I'll just go through a couple of them. Again, I don't know how broad appeal these will have. But in Boston Sports Radio, which is arguably the biggest sports radio market in the country, there's a morning talk show host who's come on in the last few years. Guy just started doing, sports talk radio essentially in his mid 30s and is pretty much ruling the market now. And he's an angry, like, contrarian kind of guy, which is normally a shtick when it comes to sports talk. But for him, it's just who he is. So it really comes off kind of genuine. But when I listen to him on the radio, like, I'm like, dude, you just piss me off so much and I hate you. I don't even want to listen. But his podcast is incredible because he's a phenomenal interviewer. The one thing he does is he just gets people to say things and tell things that they wouldn't otherwise because he has no filter. And on the podcast, it's even more so. So he gets one guest and it's either, a local sports reporter or a journalist or a legendary journalist like Bob Ryan or Dan Shaughnessy, or he gets athletes, Kevin McHale, Mo Vaughn, who used to play for the Red Sox, or just sports figures like that, and he just gets them to tell these stories, and it's like, man, I had no idea this was happening behind the scenes in 1986 on the Celtics or stuff like that. It's just super cool to listen to. So that's one of my favorites, called Enough About Me with Kirk Minahan. Not that he needs my plug because it was #1 on iTunes a couple times, so maybe I should get him to plug our podcast. Another sports one I listen to is a Section 10 podcast. It's a bunch of young guys talking about the Red Sox, led by Jared Carrabis, who is one of the funniest people you're going to hear talk about the Red Sox. It's basically sports talk with a bunch of F-bombs and dick jokes. It's put on by Barstool Sports, so that kind of gives you an idea.
Okay.
But another one that I listen to is two sports guys. They both do hockey stuff. DJ Bean used to be the hockey writer for WEI.com, and Pete Blackburn was with... he's with Fox now doing NHL stuff. DJ's now with Comcast Sportsnet locally. And they're both sports guys professionally, but if you follow them on Twitter, they're super into music, super into fashion, super into movies, and they're really just metrosexual guys, which is totally counter to what you normally think of sports people. And I totally relate to that. Like, I didn't know there was more of me out there. I really got turned on to DJ Bean because I'm not a big hockey fan. Like, the Bruins are like probably the bottom of my list, but I follow DJ to just get Bruins news because he was a Bruins beat guy. But he started tweeting about his love for Sarah Bareilles. I'm like, what? Another guy who's really into sports who also likes Sarah Bareilles, like single guy, like who's straight. Like, what's up with this? How does this actually happen?
And who is Sarah Bareilles?
You don't know who Sarah Bareilles is?
She made that
Explain
one
it to me.
A singer, love song, King of Anything, chart-topping musician. If you don't know who Sarah Bareilles is, we don't need to talk about it. Our list.
Yeah, we've already had this conversation, and I still don't give a shit.
Yeah. Anyways, so it doesn't matter. I do, and this is the point of nerdy, podcasts and that kind of stuff. So they do this podcast called Brunch, and essentially the whole idea is it's two dudes sitting down at brunch. They have these little diner sounds in the background, just talking about everything not sports. Like, they delve into sports sometimes, and then they get mad at themselves, like, oh, duh, we just talked about sports. And one of the funniest things that they do, again, two straight guys, one of them's in a relationship, and they constantly talk about what dudes are hot and what dudes are not. And it's so funny because they'll talk about a movie and they'll be like, oh yeah, and this girl was in it, and she's gorgeous. We just talked about girls, gross. Let's talk about Joe Manganiello. That guy is so hot. With the body on that guy, and they just go on a tangent. They did 2 episodes. It's now an annual thing where they actually have a girl on and they tell them who they think the hottest guys are, and then tell the girl why they're wrong. Why she's wrong about who she thinks the hottest guys are, because girls have the worst taste in guys, according to them.
That's awesome.
So Brunch is an awesome podcast. And then the other one that I listen to that's not sports related that Kevin turned me on to is Welcome to Night Vale.
Oh boy, I was about to say that.
Oh my God.
That was my introduction to podcasts. That was the very first podcast I've ever listened to.
Really?
Yeah.
So I had no idea that there was like serialized podcasts like this. And I had no idea that anybody could do such a random, weird, serialized podcast. I mean, this thing opens up talking about a dog park, but you're never supposed to go into the dog park.
Don't go to the dog park.
And you're never supposed to look at the dog park, and you're supposed to avoid the hidden figures at the dog park. Night Vale is a random town in Arizona, right, that has all these mythological things that are physically impossible to happen, but the guy who reads the news, the local news in Night Vale, is just basically saying one random statement after another that makes little to no sense, but tells a perfect story by the end, and it's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to the live show in Boston
really?
this past
Awesome.
Saturday. Oh, this is the second time I've been to the live show for them. Last year it was a show called Ghost Stories, which I think is available online. I haven't yet listened to last year's recording because I was there. But this one was All Hail the Glow Cloud.
Oh boy.
Absolutely spectacular. Honestly, just seeing the people there cosplaying as characters from a podcast it's an astounding sight. I mean, you've got these people dressed up like glow clouds and wearing things that the host has said he's wearing and wearing leggings with the symbol for Night Vale on them. And it's just heartwarming and at the same time depressing, but heartwarming. Like the people there are all there together. It was packed and sold out and just as funny as the actual podcast. And every week on the podcast, they have the weather, where they then throw it to a random musical guest each week. And the musical guest is there. And in the live show, they play like 5 or 6 songs over the course of the night. That's how they start the show, is with 4 or 5 songs, and then they throw it to the weather mid show, and you get another song in the middle. Just good stuff. Like, this was a local girl, or at least she lives out in Western Mass, that was the guest for this run of the show, first couple of episodes at the very least. She is just so happy to be part of this. Everyone there is so happy, and they have audience participation, and everyone gets involved, and it's just great. Like I want to support that. I bought a shirt. I bought a poster each year, so I've got 2 shirts, 2 posters. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, that's another part that I was hoping to touch on in the whole podcasting thing, was that there's like this huge sense of community. And with the McElroy brothers, again, they do their My Brother and Me and the Adventure Zone. They do live shows of that too, and they're coming to Austin, which is pretty close to me, which I hope I can get tickets to. But the Adventure Zone's a D&D comedy podcast first, and then D&D is secondary, of course. But they do have these sort of characters, and there's so much fan art out there. There's people that are dressing up as those characters and things like that. And there's a really huge sense of community within podcasting. And I've had the pleasure of working with some people on other podcasts. I was just a guest on the Tonight We Talk podcast. I've been on a local one here in San Antonio, Texas, Beyond the Riverwalk. There's a ton of local podcasts here in San Antonio that I've worked with. Rigor Mortis Paranormal, 210 Local Media Podcast. So there is like a community in podcasting that once you start a podcast or about podcasts, it's just really easy to get connected with a bunch of people. And, even if you do have the same interests or not, if you know about podcasts, it automatically makes you a part of this community, and it's fantastic, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah. It's been fun to see on Twitter, all the different people that, like, if we follow, they follow, and sort of get other podcasts that I can listen to that way. I started downloading, I think it was Hoonic Outcasts, mm-hmm. and a couple of others that we've come in contact with recently. Boondoggle. A couple of others, just throwing them out there. But, decent people, good, fun time, good to listen to. I do like being part of the community.
Yeah. So let's get into our next topic. So the way I want to get into this, I think, why don't y'all paint me a picture?
Oh boy.
Actually, I want Kevin to paint me a picture.
Happy little trees.
Yes. My
happy
words will be my brush.
And then
your mind will be my canvas.
We do a smiley face, and look, it's a little rock. What a beautiful.
Can we get like some dream music here with the chimes going? Put that right there. Kevin, tell me about your first experience with gaming, or give me a picture of little Kevin at the arcade or something like that. What was a memorable experience with games that are now quote unquote retro games, I guess?
I honestly don't even remember going to an arcade when I was younger prior to owning a home system. My dad was a salesman, and they had a contest at work, and the top salesman of whatever it was, whether it was the day, the week, the quarter, would win a ColecoVision, an old ColecoVision arcade system. And he did, and he brought it home. And so one of my first memories is playing, I don't even remember the name of the game. Jeez, you're going to make me look this up. I wasn't even going back this far. But it was a game where you play as a dog and you're a cat. You're a cat trying to get a mouse, I think it was. And then every once in a while a dog will come in and try to eat you. And you're playing on this thing that looks like a walkie-talkie with a knob at the top and number pad at the bottom and buttons on the side. It was the most awkward controller ever, and they were connected by phone wires to the system. They'd rest in a cradle on the top. But that's my first introduction to video games there. After that, my dad proceeded to win an Atari 2600, and then my aunt gave me a blank check for my first communion, so I wound up buying myself a Nintendo Entertainment System and a couple of games to go with that. So it came with the Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt, and then I got Biohazard Battle, I believe, or that might have been for Sega. But it was just, it snowballed. Once I got that first system, I was hooked. But we were also, despite being a salesman and all that, he was trying to provide for the family. So we didn't have a lot of extra money for it. So I didn't have a ton of games. And as time went on, it became more and more obvious because all my cousins had all of the others, like Super Nintendo, and I had a cousin that had the Game Boy virtual reality goggles that I think lasted a week. And I always dreamed of owning those, and that was the pinnacle. And even now, when I want to go back and play a game or install an emulator on my computer or set up a RetroPie to play on my TV or anything like that, I'm drawn to like the Super Nintendo games, the games that I never actually played, even though most of them are fucking terrible.
Super Nintendo games are awesome, first of all.
Okay. All right. So the one Super Nintendo game that I love, that I still go back and play every time I can, is Zombies Ate My Neighbors.
Of course you do.
No?
Yeah, I love that game.
Because you are a zombie. We discussed this pre-podcast, and you and your neighbors. I'm convinced of it.
I know
that when we come over to your house, Kevin, when we finally get this together, and my wife and I come over and we have dinner, it's going to be your neighbors.
No, I don't eat them. I get them evicted. Totally different. Different.
So Tim, I'm curious to hear how you got introduced to gaming, and I guess you're sort of retro games now. I guess they're called retro games.
My introduction was through a cousin who had an Atari. I think probably an Atari 2600, and I played Frogger and Pitfall.
Oh yeah.
Two really cool games. Pitfall was kind of a side-scrolling adventure game. It didn't look like one so much, when Super Mario Brothers came out, but at the time it was a legit side-scrolling adventure game, and it was really cool. And Frogger, obviously, an arcade classic. And I played Pac-Man on, Pizza Hut tables as a kid. Do you guys? I don't know, Jules. You probably don't remember this. Kevin, do you remember this?
I do remember this. Yes.
So Jules, if you don't remember this, Pizza Hut back in the 80s used to have a couple of tables usually in every restaurant, because people would actually go to Pizza Hut and eat sometimes. It wasn't just like takeout, yeah. And the tables were an arcade game. So essentially it was a flat table, the screen faced up, it had glass over it, and there was an arcade controller on one or a couple of sides of the table. So you'd sit there.
I've seen that done. I've just never seen that at a Pizza Hut.
Pizza Hut was the thing. Pac-Man, they had a bunch of Pac-Man. Some of them had Space Invaders, stuff like that.
Centipede? I really
Centipede, yeah. But Pac-Man was the big one. Almost all of the bigger Pizza Huts had a Pac-Man, and it was awesome. It was so cool. Like, you're sitting there with your parents waiting to, I guess it was smartphones before smartphones. You're a kid, you're sitting there with your parents, and you're bored waiting for the food, and you get to play this game. You didn't even have to put coins in. It was part of the experience. So it was super cool. I always want to get one of those.
So why don't they have those now? I mean, all I see at Pizza Hut's are that shitty crane game. There's a bunch of crane games, and that little thing where you have to build the blocks up. And it goes like left and right really fast, and you have to click the button, and then you get a prize. Maybe not even.
Well,
because gaming now is about making money.
Yeah, once upon a time in this country, there were businesses that felt they had to earn your patronage, and they had to create an experience in the store to get you there. And Pizza Hut, like I said, to a degree, was a dine-in restaurant. I mean, yeah, they did. I don't even think they did delivery. You could do carry out, but they serve the pizzas in these hot dishes, and they cut it right there and you serve it out. It was a dine-in restaurant, really. I mean, very, very different from the model of the pizza store today. So yeah, they were trying to give a reason. Why would you go to Pizza Hut? Pizza's good, but there's a little bit of entertainment here too. And it was also get teenagers in. Teenagers back in the day, teenagers would leave school. They would go and hang out places before they'd go home. It wasn't all extracurricular activities all the time, or going home and doing homework. They'd go walk down the street because their parents didn't care, and they would hang out someplace. And it could have been a place to get milkshakes and stuff like that, or let's go to the freaking Pizza Hut, get a couple slices, and play Pac-Man. Arcades were cool back then. That was one of the things I wanted to talk about on this podcast. Kevin, I'm sure, experienced this, but, again, Jules, I'm not sure if this was necessarily part of your growing up, but in the 80s, arcades were the thing, man. Arcades were awesome.
Oh, hell yeah.
I can remember, plunking $20 into TMNT, the arcade game, because it was the coolest freaking game. And it was actually an arcade game that you could, build on and beat, But you just had to keep plucking coins into that thing, dude, because you get your ass kicked. But it was a blast. Arcades were so cool. Double Dragon 2 at the arcade. Oh my gosh, mind-blowing playing Double Dragon 2 at the arcade. So much better.
TMNT and the Simpsons game.
Yes.
I was about to say that. Yep.
The arcade game.
Both of those two.
There's 30 games that are called the Simpsons game, but the arcade game.
You know which one. The Simpsons game.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a 4-player... big ass arcade game.
Who was your person? Who was your go-to?
Oh, Bart, every fucking time.
Yeah, Bart with the skateboard. Yeah.
No question.
Mm-hmm.
But those two games were absolutely spectacular. My parents, every year we would rent a cottage up in Meredith, New Hampshire, and we would go up, and they had an arcade up there called Fun Spot, and then they had Weir's Pier at Weir's Beach, New Hampshire on Lake Winnipesaukee, and the pier had 4 arcades within the same block, and it was just great. They had every game you could imagine, and we'd go there and we'd lose my dad because he'd be off playing birdie game. You roll the ball to play golf, and I'd be in there playing whatever the fuck I felt like, and they had literally everything, but I'd time it so that I could play the games that gave you. This was back when they had those games with the coins that overhang the edge, and you put the coin in, the token in, and it would actually give you tokens back. They still have it, but now it's tickets.
Right.
But I used to go in, and the first thing I'd do is walk up to those machines, and if they looked like I could win, I would drop my coin in, the coins would fall off the side, and I would play for fucking hours on that one coin before asking my mom for any other money. That was amazing. That's my childhood right there.
So do you think? Okay, for me, I think because I did go to a few different arcades, and I kind of want to go into arcade thing right now. But I went to Diversions, which is here in Texas. I think they do nickel coins. So every nickel is a token or something. It's a lot cheaper than the usual dollar gets you whatever. But anyways. And Dave & Buster's. I used to go to Dave & Buster's a lot. But I think the end for me of arcade is when they put Guitar Hero in arcades. Why? What are you doing? I don't know. I just wasn't a fan of that. Whenever that hit, I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm all set.
And they got Flappy Bird and all these other mobile games as arcade games now.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Well, it's impossible for arcades to be what they were. I mean, the thing with arcades back in the 80s is that the arcade machines were the superior platform. Yeah. The higher power processors were in there. Every arcade machine was built from the ground up to play the game that it was playing. So it was like a system optimized for a particular game. So it wasn't, are we going to take this game from a home console and put it in arcade where people can, for some reason, go and pay money? It was the opposite. It was, how can the home console best capture the arcade experience? How close will the graphics be, because they won't be as good? The button mapping, like that was the thing. TMNT, the arcade game, was amazing. It was released for the Super Nintendo. The graphics weren't too far off, but the button system wasn't as good. There was no joystick. There was 4 buttons instead of, I think, 6 buttons on the arcade platform.
So it was a different experience.
So it was a better gaming experience. That's why you went to the arcade, because you went to see the latest and greatest technology. When the Sega Saturn came out, the Sega Saturn was built off of the premier arcade platform at the time. It was the first time they had been able to take the arcade architecture and affordably put it in a home system. So
that's awesome.
That's really when things turned around, because after that you had N64, which was a powerhouse, and the home systems were outperforming the arcades essentially because they couldn't, build them enough to make money. But back in the 80s, it was totally the opposite way around. They were the premier powerhouse platforms to play games. It was so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is kind of interesting to go into like an arcade now, because Fun Spot's still active, the Pier is still active up in New Hampshire. But you go in there now and you realize that each of these machines is one game. Where I have a Raspberry Pi, which is, a little bit bigger than like 2 business cards, and I can play every single one of those games on my home TV with the graphics that are on the arcade. And I can, if I wanted to, I can build my own arcade controller for it and go from there. I actually picked up on Craigslist a couple years ago an arcade, like an Asteroids arcade machine. I had the intention of restoring it, but I never quite got to it and had to sell it. But awe-inspiring to think of the work that went into this and the space that they needed to have all of these games, and I can carry it around on a little memory stick in my pocket now.
Yeah, technology's come a long way, and it's certainly taken us away from the arcade experience. Back in the 80s, man, like Kevin said, any beach, any ocean area with a boardwalk, any campground had 2 or 3 arcade machines there, so the kids would have something to do in the meantime. Every place that they were trying to draw youth would have arcades. Everyone, and it was the place to hang out. It was totally the place to be in the 80s, was the arcade.
And I do think it is fun now to go into an arcade and see some of the things that they're trying to innovate with that normal people aren't going to have in their homes, like racing simulators that move so that you feel like you're racing in it.
Yeah, those are fun.
Or or one of my favorites, Time Crisis.
Time Crisis is
either
great.
of you ever played Time Crisis?
Yeah, I think some of these machines are really cool.
You get the pedal that you step on to come out from hiding. You take your foot off the pedal and your character goes back into hiding. And it's just a little tiny thing like that, but it makes you feel like you're in the game because you're stepping on it rather than pressing a button to do that.
But how much are you paying to play the game? That's the problem with arcades. They're so expensive.
No, I know.
Like, I can't go and play because, or, even come want to take my nephew or whatever, because you got to pay $4. $4 quarters, $1, just to get into the game. And if it's the first time you've played, you don't last very long. I mean, it used to be $1 for a game, and you pump in, let's say $5, you're playing for half an hour.
Sure, and I mean that is the reason that arcade games were so tough back in the day, and Pac-Man didn't have an end; it just got faster and faster until the game broke because it overflowed. Really, that's the truth. Is because it was not necessarily about beating the game; it was about how long can they make you play. And so it was a quarter. It was a $1 billion quarter industry, and that's great. Like really, honestly. But that's where Nintendo hard comes from, because when they started making the home consoles, they started making the games the same way, and it was just super hard, even though you had the opportunity to play for longer without spending that money. And you still, like with the first Nintendo games, you couldn't save your progress. Right. Like an arcade game, it's not like you can walk into an arcade and be like, okay, well, I got to level 3 last time I was here and pick up from there like you can in games now.
Yeah, that was one of the cool things about old video games, I think, was the difficulty level. And it wasn't so much like, yeah, a lot of the games are really hard now, like the battle sequences are complex and stuff like that, but you save your progress, you start from a couple minutes before, and then you just jump right back into it. It was the frustration difficulty level that you had in those old Nintendo games, because you'd play for like an hour to get to level 5, and all of a sudden you fall off a cliff, and it's like, I have to start over and do that all again? You're like, what? But it keeps you coming back because it's so like deliciously punishing. I mean, it's really crazy what we used to have to go through to beat games. So when you beat it, it was like it wasn't just a time investment, from a sense, I've logged 80 hours into this game and I beat it. Can you log 40 hours and beat it? No, it was like I played this game 80,000 times before I finally beat this, and it was this tremendous sense of accomplishment. It was really just something to brag about. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, and you'd have to like pass the controller off to a friend every other level or every other death just because there was no two-player.
You had to just pass it off to the next person,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think I want to get into actual like favorite games. We talked a little about the arcade and stuff. We got some people that tweeted us because I asked, what's your favorite retro game? The FFR podcast, Freeform Radio podcast, at FFR podcast. They said they love some NES classics, Kung Fu, Mario Brothers, Zelda, and Game Boy. Kevin, I think it was your co-host on your Chevron Lock, but at Chevron Podcast says Mario is always a classic. Pole position on Atari was my jam as a kid, though. Mario Kart caused some chaos around the house.
Yeah, that wasn't me tweeting from that account. That was BC that I record with.
Cool. And then at Cheap Talk 84 said Super Mario World SNES was the first game I conquered, all 96 levels. Awesome. Congratulations for that. But I think, let's say like what favorite game before the 64? I don't know. What how do you want to do this, I guess? What are some of your favorite games that stuck out to you? We already mentioned a few, but which ones lead the pack, I think?
Yeah, go ahead, Kev.
You know what? There was a series of games known as the Strike games, like Jungle Strike, Desert Strike, Urban Strike. And I remember playing them on, I believe it was Genesis or the Super Nintendo when I was over at my cousin's house. For some reason, you're flying around in a helicopter, you're blowing things up, you know, getting upgrades. It's like a 2.5D game, so you're third person. But I love those games. They stuck with me. They're something that I still wake up at night thinking about, and I wish I could go back and play them in the way that I played them before. Because every time I try now, it's really awkward playing on a computer keyboard or on my phone.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I could say my favorite, but they're like not as far back as that. So I don't know.
Yeah, Jules is like, well, my favorite is Mario Run on the iPhone.
Yeah, I got that app, and it's like super cool. And yeah, that's my first introduction to gaming, guys. That's when I started. No, I mean, what I was gonna say was I really like the classic Sonic, just 2D, run to the side, run different routes. Sonic's amazing. For the N64, which is kind of was my primary, like, I guess, main introduction into gaming, was Mario Kart. You can't go wrong with Mario Kart. 007, whenever you got like 4 people in it, fantastic game.
GoldenEye,
and then
GoldenEye.
GoldenEye was great.
I lost so many friends over that game.
The only fights, I lived with 2 of my best friends for 4 years after they got out of college, and the people always say don't live with your best friends. We had the best freaking time for 4 years. It was an absolute blast. We lived in a house. My friend owned the house, so it wasn't like we were in danger of eviction or anything like that. We could do whatever we wanted, and we had a blast. The only fights we ever got into were over Smash Brothers and Mario Kart.
Yep,
that was it.
Yep.
Everything else was good in the hood, man, but there was a couple of frustrating situations in Smash Brothers and Mario Kart. There was some controllers thrown. It was, that was when
those two get really intense.
Yep.
Yeah. I bought an N64 for freshman year of college, and the same thing happened. We would have people in my room all the time, and it led to fistfights. We were playing Smash Brothers and Mario Kart and strangling each other and throwing each other down the stairs from the 15th floor. It did not end well. There's a reason I did not continue in college, and I can't get into it for legal reasons.
So favorite games for me, I mean, I'm a Nintendo guy, so classic stuff. Obviously, Super Mario Brothers was what did it. I mean, like I said, I had played Atari and stuff like that, but when I got an NES for Christmas, I mean, not Christmas, for my birthday, when I asked for an Atari and we plugged in and played Super Mario Brothers and I saw that for the first time, I mean, that, like Kevin said, it snowballed from there. But
the graphics are so real.
Oh, dude, it was unlike anything. I jump on this guy and he goes away, and then I get a mushroom and I get bigger. What is this wizardry? There's fireballs. There's, pipes that go
Turtle
up and down and
everywhere.
shortcuts and warps. Oh my gosh, it was like insane. So that was the one that started it all. So it's cliche, but I've got to say Super Mario Brothers. Zelda's always been a passion of mine. The first game was really the first open world game that ever existed. I mean, you think about now, the big trend is open world gaming, and obviously the worlds are so much bigger. But when you started Zelda, there was a little guide that came with the instructions that kind of gave you some hints and stuff, but there was no direction. You didn't know where to go. You went into this very first cave, guy gave you a sword, and from that you were on your own. There was 9 labyrinths, they called them, or dungeons. You could go to dungeon 9 right off the bat. You would lose, but you could go there. You could go anywhere on the map. There was no restriction. So it was the first open world game ever. And, from an imagination standpoint, at that age and at that time when it wasn't photorealism, you're imagining yourself in that world, and that was a cool experience. So yeah, Zelda was a huge one for me. Contra, Super Contra, Castlevania 2 specifically, with the whole night and day element to that gameplay was really cool. I loved that we talked about Double Dragon. Double Dragon 2 was such a good game, both of the arcade and one of the really great arcade ports for the NES. They did a great job capturing that. And going weird into the archives, Faxanadu was a game for the NES. Maybe we could put up a picture of this on the podcast, because I know this is a super niche game on Facebook or something. But Faxanadu is essentially a spin-off of a RPG Japanese series called Xanadu, and it went more into the side-scrolling adventure / RPG element fantasy genre. Picture like Legend of Zelda 2, A Link to the Past, that kind of side-scrolling thing. But you had level up on magic, level up on attack. You had save points where you would go to this, I forget what it was, a priest or a yogi or something like that, and he would give you a mantra. And the mantra was a code, and you had to write down that code, because in order to pick up from where you left off, you had to enter that code as reopen the game. To get back to that point. So it was save your progress, but it was more like Metroid. Metroid had a code system for save your progress rather than the Legend of Zelda where you just saved it. But Faxanadu was cool because it combined all of those mythological fantasy, medieval elements that I really liked with the side-scrolling action that Mario had. So that was a cool game. And Metroid's the first 2 Metroids. One of the things that I find interesting right now is, where Zelda's really, really big, probably game of the year this year, on online message boards and on Reddit. There's been this real movement over the last couple years, and I know that it has to do somewhat with the whole, transgender topic, but there's this big movement to either make Link gender fluid or to give you the option to play Link as a male or a female. And
cool.
Well,
I mean, wasn't Link? Didn't they do that already though?
No. So I get it. I get why people want to do it, because Link is supposed to be like an avatar for the gamer. And they say, well, if I'm a woman, I can't play the game and identify that I'm playing with a male character. Well, it's just a character. It's he's the character in the story. He always has been. I don't see why you need to do that. But they're like, there's no women in video games. No women in video games. Metroid, Samus was a woman. 1986, Nintendo, they get on Nintendo about not putting women in their games. They were pioneers on this. The hero of that game, the big reveal at the end of Metroid, was that you're playing with this chick all along. What?
Right, but that's like the reveal that Dumbledore was gay. That's sort of an after the fact type of thing. I'm not buying that. That was not a woman that you were playing until the end. It was just a character.
Yeah, but that's the whole point. The whole point was to say that a female character could be the lead character of this action-adventure game. Because video games were very much a boys' thing back then, you know? And it was like,
Okay,
I want to play as a guy, and I want to be a guy, and guys are the heroes, and, you know, princesses are the damsels in distress. So to convince these male players, probably 90% male players at that time, that they're playing with this really cool, super awesome character, and then at the end, guess what? It was a girl. What? You know, it opens their mind. It was such a cool thing by Nintendo to do that. They were pioneers in that.
Absolutely, and to your point, 90% of gamers back then were men. Now that is not true.
Agreed.
And I think that having something that you identify with and something that you want to play, I think that works. You know, if you're a girl and you want to play as a girl, and I think you should want to play as whatever you want to play as, I don't see a problem with having a character you can play in the Zelda series that is a female.
Make a different series. This is my whole argument. Link has been the hero of the Zelda series for 30 years. If you like Zelda, you like Zelda. And this is the story. But if you want a game with a female hero, talk Nintendo into making another series, launching a new series specifically with a female hero. We don't need to change Zelda.
And I think that should happen too. But you know what? You don't even have to change anything in the game. Just switch so that if you want to play as a girl, now you're playing as Princess Zelda, but she's not a princess. She's just some chick named Zelda.
And you're saving Link.
You're fighting for Prince Link, and he's, you know, whatever, been asleep for 1,000 years.
It's pandering, in my opinion. It does nothing to evolve gaming, to evolve gender roles in gaming. It does nothing to accomplish that. What would accomplish that would be for Nintendo to listen to the outcry and go, you know what? Let's create a whole new fantasy series, a new IP that's centered around a strong female character. Because now we have something that's going to potentially have sequels, be critically acclaimed, that was created specifically with a strong female character. That is what evolves and creates, you know, new facets in the gaming world, not just simply flip-flopping the main character. I mean, that's
I know,
pandering.
and it's such bullshit, because what's inevitably going to happen is they're going to try that, and they're not going to put as much effort into it to make it a good game that people want to play.
And then
it's going to flop, and they're going to point to it and go, look, no one wants to play as a girl.
Yeah, no.
I get what you're saying, but to counter that, Nintendo never releases a game that they don't put effort into. Name one.
You can change the way Link looks, and he has a lot of clothing styles and clothing choices, so you can say that he can dress however he wants. And I've seen some, you know, I don't know how your Link looks, Tim, but I know there's a wide variety of ways that Link can look, and some would say it's a very androgynous look.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah,
that's okay.
Well, and I'm fine with that. I just don't. Like I said, to me, to just flip flop the main character, it's pandering. It's, you know, if you're really mad because there's not enough female characters in games, don't just give the ability to flip flop the main character in a pre-existing series. Make a new series. Force them to put the, like, you know, to Kevin's point, put the effort in, create a new IP that's going to be tremendously popular, because most Nintendo IPs end up being tremendously popular, that is built around a strong female character, that's central to the story. That does more to enhance the experience or to enhance females in gaming than to just say, oh, hey, we're playing with Linka, and it's a girl.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just, all you're doing is,
that's
low effort. That's low effort to pander to a particular outcry. Put the effort in, make a new series. It could be really cool. I'd play it. You know what I mean? I would love a new series that would be similar in vein to Zelda in the first place. But if it had a female lead character, great. I'm all for it. Let's do it. I say go about it that way.
I think in comic books, they're doing it very well, and that's really awesome. I mean, if you haven't seen like the past couple years, I think in comic books there's been so many more female superheroes, so many people of color, different types of, you know, just different types of people being superheroes, and it's really awesome. So that's something to look to if you want a good template at what they're doing, bringing people of all kinds, all colors, all shapes or whatever, and giving them powers, and, you know, following a storyline with them, and they're doing it really well. DC and Marvel, I think. So yeah,
right on. And Nintendo, let's get a new Metroid game, a new good Metroid game, please.
They did it for handheld, no?
Yeah, it wasn't very good.
Back.
I want like another 3, either a new side-scrolling 2D, like legit, like new Super Mario Brothers, side-scrolling adventure game, or I want another Metroid Prime, 3D, really
Heck
good
yes.
shoot 'em up game, and that's centered around a female character, which I've liked for 30 years. So let's bring us that,
Yeah.
and then let's get us another IP with a female character too. But please give us a Metroid, just because it's so freaking cool.
Yep. You heard it, Nintendo. Get on it.
Those are our three statements. A new Metroid game. What else? Takedown of Taylor Swift.
Yeah, take down
And
Taylor
what was the other
Swift. Get Elon Musk as the
There you
CEO
go.
of the combined Tesla Apple company, and let's get a new Metroid game.
It would be cool, like
Done.
the little Apple logo and then like a big T. And yeah. Anyways, so yeah, that's the episode. What are we gonna do for next week? Do you have any ideas what we're gonna do for next week?
Shit, it's like you spring this on me every
Right?
week. You'd think I'd
Oh
prepare.
God.
Last week,
And
Kevin
every
I
week
talked
I'm like,
about
fuck,
it,
I got
and
nothing.
we were prepared, and you just said that, Jules, and I had the exact same thought Kevin did. I'm like, I forgot to think about next week.
Oh God.
We got to do this every week.
It's like we do this podcast like one podcast at a time, like we're gonna cancel ourselves or something.
Yeah. We're gonna,
Right.
When
this is
clearly
the
we're
last
not
one.
gonna do that.
Final podcast. Nope.
No, I definitely want to talk at least a little bit about Fast and the Furious next week. I'm going to go see it Monday because I love Fast and the Furious
Actually,
franchise.
yeah. Let's.
and
I think that we
I
already,
can nerd out about that.
Yeah, we already talked about that, right? The Fast and the Furious. Yeah, sure. Let's we can do some nerdy news and then Fast and the Furious. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we can make it work.
Very cool. I'd like to thank Adipsia for the use of his song Friends Don't Let Friends Go to TGI Fridays. You can hear more of his music on adipsia.bandcamp.com. He's going to be playing here in San Antonio tonight whenever the podcast comes out. So if you can, go check him out.
Check out the music from the new album, The Stoic.
There you go. Very cool. Yeah, I say that all the time. So I was like, yeah.
Good. Well,
see him
Kevin and I
live.
were talking yesterday about, like, I don't know, man. I just think that's a really cool name for an album. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I just, something about The Stoic is just a cool name for an album. So
Yeah.
good job, Adipsia.
I had him on my podcast, Texas Music Spotlight. Anyways, okay, go. Thank you. Go find us on Facebook, all that stuff, Twitter, Instagram, at NerdyThingsPod, at NerdyThingsPod, and you can email us some questions, comments, or if you have suggestions for the coming weeks, nerdythingspod
Or
at
hate mail,
gmail.com. or hate mail, please.
Love or anything.
Letterboxd.
yeah, hate Tim, love me. All right. Thanks, guys. See y'all later.
Bye.
Later.